I still remember the smell of damp wood the night my son left me in that house. The cabin sat deep in the pines, where the air was cool, even in late summer, and the sound of the wind in the trees could make a person feel smaller than a shadow. He drove me there in silence, the headlights brushing across the rough dirt road, the trees leaning in like dark witnesses. "Mom," Daniel finally said as the car rattled over a patch of stones, "you'll be fine here for a while, just until I get things settled back in the city." I didn't answer right away. I'd been staring at the hollow reflection of my face in the window, trying to believe this was only temporary. The way he said "for a while" sounded more like forever. The cabin came into view, a two-story structure with sagging shutters and a crooked porch that tilted as though it were bowing under the weight of its own years. There was no glow of welcome inside, only darkness, like a mouth about to swallow me. When he carried my small bag inside, the floorboards complained under his boots. "There's food in the pantry. The generator works. Cell service is spotty, but you'll be okay." I tried to ask when he'd be back, but he looked away, mumbling something about a few days. I wanted to believe him, but the way he avoided my eyes told a different story. The moment that broke me came as he turned to leave. He hesitated at the door as if wanting to say something, anything, but instead he just muttered, "Take care of yourself," and walked into the dark, starting the engine without another word. I stood on the porch, the chill of the forest night settling on my shoulders like an unwanted shawl. The red glow of his taillights disappeared between the trees, and with it went the last bit of warmth I had clung to. Inside, the air smelled of old smoke and damp fabric. I opened the curtains and let the moonlight spill across the dusty furniture. A single rocking chair sat near the fireplace, as though waiting for its old occupant to return. I lowered myself into it, feeling the ache in my knees flare up, and listened to the creak of the chair mingle with the sigh of the wind. That first night stretched on endlessly. I heard every groan of the house, every whisper of the branches against the siding. Around midnight, something scratched along the porch, perhaps just a raccoon. I told myself, though the sound of slow, deliberate steps made me wonder if it was more than that. I tried to sleep, but the mattress in the upstairs bedroom sagged in the middle and smelled faintly of mildew. I lay there staring at the wooden beams of the ceiling until the darkness shifted into gray morning light. The next day passed in silence, except for the occasional caw of a distant crow. I unpacked my things to dresses, a few sweaters, a photo of Daniel when he was 12, grinning at the camera with a fishing rod in hand. I placed that photo on the mantel above the cold fireplace. Looking at his young face made my throat tighten. I made tea with the last of the leaves I'd brought from home, the kettle hissing on the old propane stove. The mug trembled slightly in my hand as I lifted it to my lips. I wasn't afraid of the woods themselves. I had grown up near forests. What unsettled me was the way Daniel had looked when he dropped me off, like a man carrying a secret too heavy to share. By the second night, I began to feel the weight of the house pressing in on me. Its silence was not the ordinary kind. It felt watchful. I thought I heard footsteps outside my bedroom door just after midnight, but when I swung it open, the hallway was empty, lit only by a thin ribbon of moonlight through the window at the far end. On the third day, I decided to explore the edge of the woods behind the house. The path was overgrown, but I followed it until I reached a small clearing where wildflowers had managed to bloom despite the lack of sunlight. From there, I could see the roof of the cabin through the trees, slanted and lonely, like a stranded boat in a green ocean. That afternoon, I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. A small part of me hoped Daniel might at least text to ask if I was doing all right. But the screen stayed stubbornly blank. That evening, as dusk settled like ash over the treetops, I made a simple dinner: canned soup warmed on the stove, and ate it alone at the wooden table. The only sound was the occasional drip of water from a leaky faucet. Later, I sat once again in the rocking chair with the photo of my son in my lap. I remembered the day it had been taken, his father still alive then, the three of us on a fishing trip by the lake. That boy in the photo had loved me with a pure heart. I couldn't reconcile him with the man who had left me here. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through cracks in the shutters. I thought I heard a faint thump near the porch, but convinced myself it was a falling branch. I closed my eyes, trying to hold on to the sound of Daniel's laughter from years ago, before everything had gone wrong. That night, sleep came in brief, broken stretches. I dreamed of being lost among the trees, calling for Daniel, hearing only my own echo. I woke before dawn with my heart pounding, unsure whether the knocking sound I thought I'd heard was part of the dream or real. When the morning sun filtered weakly through the blinds, I forced myself up and made tea again. The cabin seemed colder despite the light. I told myself I had to be strong, that I had survived worse in my life than a few nights in a forgotten house in the woods. But as I sipped the tea, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting. The fourth day began with a pale mist creeping across the woods, turning the view from the porch into a gray blur. I stood there wrapped in my thin shawl, watching the fog curl between the trees like slow-moving ghosts. The air smelled of damp earth and pine needles. The silence pressed on me harder than ever. I tried humming an old hymn to keep myself company, but the tune died in my throat. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snapped sharp, sudden. I waited for another sound, but none came. I went back inside and set about tidying the cabin. The broom's bristles barely held together, and each sweep stirred little puffs of dust from the warped wooden floor. Underneath the stairs, I found a small wooden box, half hidden behind a pile of rags. Its latch was rusted shut, and though I tried to pry it open with a butter knife, it wouldn't budge. By afternoon, the mist had lifted, but the day stayed gloomy. I heated the last of the soup and forced myself to eat, though my appetite had vanished. The phone sat on the table, screen dark and lifeless, like it had given up on me too. That evening the sky turned an odd shade of greenish-gray before the rain began. The storm rolled in with a low rumble, shaking the loose shutters and sending needles of water through gaps in the window frame. I lit the old oil lamp I'd found in the pantry, and its flickering glow made the cabin look both cozier and somehow eerie, the shadows stretching like long fingers along the walls. I tried reading one of the books left behind on the shelf, an old novel with yellowed pages, but my eyes kept drifting to the window where the rain streaked down in silver lines around midnight. As the storm reached its peak, I heard it again, the slow, deliberate creak of footsteps on the porch. My breath hitched, and I froze, straining to listen. The wind howled outside, rattling the porch boards, and for a moment I thought it was just the storm. Then came a soft tap, 3 gentle knocks against the front door. I waited, my heart hammering. "Daniel," I whispered, though I knew it couldn't be him. No answer. The knocks didn't come again. I sat motionless in the rocking chair until the storm finally passed, leaving behind the dripping hush of wet leaves. By morning, the knocks felt almost like a dream, but when I stepped outside, I saw faint muddy prints on the porch steps too large to be from any animal I could think of. I went through the day in a fog of unease, jumping at every sound. I checked the pantry and counted the cans of food, as if to reassure myself that nothing had been disturbed on the 6th day. The first call came. The phone buzzed on the table, startling me so much I nearly dropped the cup I was holding. My heart leaped when I saw Daniel's name on the screen. I swiped to answer, but the line went dead before I could say a word. I called back immediately. No answer. A minute later, the phone rang again. "Daniel," I said quickly. Silence. Double quotes. "Daniel, is that you? Please talk to me." The call cut off again. My hands shook as I set the phone down. I stared at it, willing it to ring again. When it did, the same thing happened. An empty line, then the click of disconnection. Over the next few hours, the calls kept coming. Sometimes I heard faint static on the line, sometimes a low breath as if someone were about to speak but thought better of it. By nightfall, I had counted 32 missed calls. I wanted to believe it was Daniel trying desperately to reach me, but a part of me wondered if someone else had his phone. That night I barely slept, jumping every time the phone vibrated against the wooden table. By morning, the missed calls had climbed to 45. I stared at the screen, feeling both terrified and strangely relieved. If he was calling that much, it meant he hadn't completely abandoned me. But why wouldn't he speak? I sat at the table, clutching the phone, thinking back to the last time we'd spoken face to face, the way he couldn't meet my eyes, the tension in his shoulders. Something was wrong, something he hadn't told me before leaving me here. Late that afternoon, I decided to walk the path again, needing fresh air to clear my head. The forest was damp but quiet, as though holding its breath after the storm. Halfway down the trail, I found something that made me stop cold. A single black glove lying in the mud, still wet from the rain. It was large, clearly a man's glove, and I didn't recognize it as anything Daniel owned. A chill ran down my spine. I left it where it lay and hurried back to the cabin, locking the door behind me. That evening, as darkness fell once more, I sat with the lamp glowing on the table, staring at the phone and waiting for it to ring again. I whispered to the photo on the mantel, "Why Daniel, what's happening to us? The house creaked as if in answer, but no words came, only the long sigh of the wind seeping through the trees. That night I dreamed of the phone ringing. The screen glowed an eerie green, Daniel's name flickering, as if the letters were alive. When I answered, all I heard was the sound of the woods, at night crickets, a distant owl, the rush of the wind and, then a whisper, too faint to understand. I woke with a jolt, heart hammering, my ears still ringing in the silence of the cabin. The phone lay dark on the table beside my bed, but the unease clung to me as if the dream had been more than a dream. The seventh day began colder than the others. The mist that usually drifted through the trees was gone, replaced by a still, heavy air that made the woods feel watchful. I forced myself to have breakfast bread and a jar of honey I'd found in the cupboard, but the taste turned to ash in my mouth. I couldn't stop thinking about the black glove on the trail and the muddy footprints I'd seen days before. Around noon, the phone rang again. "Daniel," I said, as soon as I answered that there was no reply. "Please, son, talk to me. I'm scared." This time, I heard something, a soft inhale, then the faintest trace of a voice, rough and low, like a distant echo. "Mom." My heart leaped. "Daniel, where are you? Are you all right?" The voice cut off before I could hear more, the line going dead once again. I called back repeatedly, each attempt going straight to voicemail. By afternoon, the woods had grown darker, even though the sun hadn't yet set. The clouds gathered low and heavy, and the breeze carried the damp scent of another storm. I sat in the rocking chair with the lamp already lit beside me, my nerves frayed. My thoughts turned again to the day Daniel had left me here. How tense he'd seemed, how quickly he'd driven away, as though afraid of being seen. Memories began to creep in, uninvited and painful. Daniel as a boy, his father teaching him to chop firewood behind our old house, the laughter that used to echo through the halls. Those were the days before grief carved walls between us, before the silence became our way of avoiding the wounds we couldn't heal. As dusk settled, I heard the crunch of gravel outside. My breath caught. I moved to the window as quietly as my aching knees would allow and peered through the slit in the curtain. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing where the trees began, tall, still, barely distinguishable in the growing dark. "Daniel," I whispered, though I knew it was too far to hear me. The figure didn't move. I stayed frozen by the window, afraid to blink in case it disappeared. Door came closer. Finally, after what felt like hours but was surely only a minute or two, the figure stepped back into the shadows and was gone. I locked every door and window in the cabin, my fingers trembling so badly I nearly dropped the keys. The phone stayed silent all evening. By nightfall, the rain began again, soft at first, then harder, drumming against the roof like hurried footsteps. The lamp flickered as the wind rattled the walls, and I prayed silently that the generator would hold. Around midnight, I heard the phone buzz once more. I grabbed it, my heart in my throat. "Daniel." A long pause, then a ragged whisper. "Mom, listen to me. Don't open the door, no matter what you hear. Promise me." "Daniel, where are you? What's happening?" The line crackled, and then the call ended. I stood in the darkened cabin, staring at the phone, my fingers numb with fear. What did he mean by, "Don't open the door"? I checked the locks again, then sat with my back against the door as the storm raged outside. Minutes later, a slow knock came, 3 soft thuds against the wood. Just like the night of the first storm, I held my breath, clutching the phone like a lifeline. Another knock followed, slightly louder this time. I whispered through the door, "Who's there?" No answer. The knocking stopped as suddenly as it had started, leaving only the rain and the creak of the house around me. I stayed awake until dawn, too afraid to sleep. When the pale light of morning seeped through the curtains, I finally dared to move from the door. My body ached from sitting in the same position all night. I peeked outside. The porch was empty, but the wet wood showed fresh, muddy footprints larger than Daniel's, and not from my shoes. The sight made me shiver despite the muggy air. I knew then that whoever had been knocking wasn't my son. And I knew, too, that Daniel's warning had come too late. By the 8th morning, the woods felt like they were holding their breath. No birds sang. No wind stirred the wet leaves outside. I brewed tea in silence, trying to steady my trembling hands. I couldn't stop thinking about the muddy footprints on the porch. They were solid proofs that someone else had been out there in the storm. I kept replaying Daniel's last words. "Don't open the door, no matter what you hear." Why hadn't he warned me sooner? I spent the day pacing the small cabin, watching the tree line through the windows. The shadows between the trees seemed to shift, sometimes forming the shape of a person, sometimes just my imagination. Around noon, I finally decided to call the only other number saved in my phone, our old neighbor, Ruth. She answered on the third ring, her voice warm but tinged with worry. "Clara, honey, are you okay? Daniel told me you'd gone to stay somewhere quiet." "Quiet isn't the word I'd use," I said, trying to laugh, but my voice cracked. "Ruth, did Daniel tell you why he left me here?" "No, just that you needed a break." She hesitated. "Is something wrong?" I almost told her everything, the knocks, the footprints, the strange calls, but stopped myself. If I said it aloud, it might sound like I was losing my mind. "Never mind," I whispered. "I'll be fine." But I wasn't fine. Late that afternoon, I heard the crunch of gravel again, the same slow, deliberate steps I'd heard before. I froze, gripping the phone like a weapon, though I knew it was useless. A shadow moved past the front window. I ducked low, heart pounding. Then came the voice, low male, unfamiliar. "Mrs. Harper." The words were muffled by the door. "I need to speak to you." Every instinct told me not to answer. I stayed perfectly still. "Please," the man said. "I'm a friend of Daniel's." I wanted to believe him. The tone in his voice was neither threatening nor keen, just strange, as though he were reciting lines he barely remembered. When I didn't respond, he knocked again, slow, deliberate, 3 times. "Daniel asked me to check on you," he said. "Open up. It's not safe here." I almost reached for the latch, but remembered Daniel's warning. Instead, I called out, my voice trembling, "If you're a friend of Daniel's, tell me where he was born." The man went quiet. For several seconds, I heard only the rain dripping from the roof, then the sound of footsteps retreating, fading into the woods. I sank against the wall, my knees weak, and stayed there until I could no longer hear anything outside. That night, I tried calling Daniel again. To my surprise, the phone rang instead of going to voicemail. He answered on the second ring, his voice hoarse and urgent. "Mom, listen to me, pack your things. Leave the house. Go now." "I can't," I said. "There's a man out there. He said he was your friend." There was silence on the line. Then Daniel swore under his breath. "Don't open that door to anyone," he said. "Not him. Not anyone." "Mom, I need to tell you something, but you have to promise to stay calm." I gripped the edge of the table. "Daniel, what's going on?" "You remember, the man I told you about years ago, the one who ruined my business, the one I testified against?" I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "He's out of prison," Daniel said. "He blames me for everything that happened. I thought you'd be safer away from the city. That's why I brought you there." His words settled like a stone in my chest. "So you left me here alone, with no warning, in the middle of the woods." "I thought he wouldn't find you," Daniel said quietly. "I didn't think he'd figure out where you were." I was wrong. The line went quiet except for the faint hiss of static. I wanted to shout at him, to tell him how terrified I'd been, but the fear that someone dangerous was out there listening kept my voice low. "What am I supposed to do now?" I asked. "Stay inside. Don't trust anyone who comes to the door," he said. "I'm on my way." The call ended abruptly. I stood there for a long time, listening to the distant rumble of thunder and the creak of the house as the wind picked up again. I thought about the man at the door, about the way he had said my name as if he'd been waiting for me. The generator hummed softly in the background, but even its steady sound couldn't drown out the feeling that I was being watched at. By midnight, the rain had stopped. The silence outside was worse. Then the storm, so heavy it pressed against the windows, was just starting to drift into an uneasy sleep when the sound of a car engine broke. The quiet headlights swept across the walls of the cabin, too bright for Daniel's old sedan. I crept to the window and peeked out, careful to stay hidden behind the curtain. A black SUV had stopped at the edge of the clearing. The driver's door opened slowly, and a tall figure stepped out. Even in the dim porch light, I could tell it wasn't Daniel. The figure stood there for a moment, looking straight at the cabin as if he could see me through the curtain. Then, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. My phone buzzed at the same time. Glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I didn't answer. The buzzing stopped, then started again. Finally, I picked up, my hand trembling. "Hello." A deep voice I didn't recognize said, "You can't hide forever, Mrs. Harper." The call ended before I could respond. I dropped the phone, backing away from the window, every muscle in my body tense with terror. The SUV's engine started again, and the vehicle backed slowly into the shadows until the sound of its tires on gravel faded completely. I stood alone in the cabin, the darkness pressing in, realizing for the first time that I wasn't just a frightened old woman in the woods. I was a target. The night after the SUV disappeared, I didn't sleep. I sat in the rocking chair near the front door, with the shotgun Daniel had left in the hallway closet years ago. I'd never fired it in my life, but holding it gave me the illusion of safety. The forest outside was so still, it felt unnatural. I kept thinking about that voice on the phone. You can't hide forever. By dawn, the sky had turned a dull gray. I made myself some tea just to keep my hands from shaking. The warmth of the mug barely reached my fingers. Around 8 in the morning, I heard the distant growl of an engine. My heart leaped, hoping it was Daniel. I peeked out the window. A silver sedan came into view, speeding slightly over the gravel road. Relief washed over me when I recognized the dent on the front bumper. Daniel's car. He parked so fast that gravel flew, and he was out of the car before the engine had fully shut down. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, clothes wrinkled as if he hadn't changed in days. "Mom," he called as he jogged up to the porch. I unlocked the door and pulled him inside before he could finish knocking. "You're here," I said, my voice breaking. Finally, he hugged me tightly. His embrace felt more desperate than comforting, like he was clinging to me as much as I was to him. "We don't have much time," he said, pulling away. "I need to check the house and the perimeter." I watched as he moved through the cabin, shutting all the curtains, checking the locks on every window, even lifting the rugs to look at the floorboards. His paranoia made my stomach churn. "Daniel," I said softly, "tell me what's going on, all of it." He paused, his back to me. "I was trying to protect you," he said finally, "but I made it worse." I waited silently, letting him take his time. "The man I told you about, the one who ruined my business, his name is Warren," Daniel said. "I testified against him in court. He went to prison for fraud and extortion. He swore he'd make me pay for it. And now he's out," I whispered. Daniel nodded grimly. "I thought he'd go after me in the city. I didn't think he'd come for you." I sank into the couch, the weight of his words pressing down on me. "You left me here alone, Daniel, in the middle of nowhere. I thought I was going crazy." He knelt in front of me, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Mom. I thought you'd be safe here. I thought I could handle him myself." I wanted to be angry, but all I felt was an ache deep in my chest. He was still my son, the same boy who used to chase fireflies in our backyard. Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps on the porch froze us both. Daniel motioned for me to stay quiet. He grabbed the shotgun I'd been holding all night and stepped carefully toward the window. We heard a knock, gentle, almost polite. "Mrs. Harper," a man's voice called. "This is Deputy Callahan. We got a report about suspicious activity near this property." Daniel hesitated, glancing at me. "Do you recognize that voice?" he whispered. I shook my head. "No, stay behind me," he said. He opened the door slightly, keeping the shotgun hidden behind it. A uniformed man stood on the porch, his badge catching the morning light. His cruiser was parked at the edge of the clearing. Daniel lowered the shotgun but didn't relax. "How do we know you're really a deputy?" he asked. The man raised an eyebrow. "That's an unusual question." "Answer it anyway," Daniel said sharply. "Show me your ID." The deputy took out his wallet and flipped it open to reveal his identification. Daniel studied it for a long moment before stepping aside to let him in. "I'm here because your neighbor, Ruth, called," the deputy said. "She said she's been trying to reach you, Mrs. Harper, but your phone's been cutting out. She's worried." I felt a wave of guilt. "I didn't want to worry her," I said, "but something strange has been happening here." The deputy frowned. "Strange how?" Daniel started to explain about the man at the door, the SUV, the phone calls. The deputy listened carefully, his expression serious. "We've had reports about a black SUV in the area," he said finally. "We think it belongs to someone connected to Warren. He's been spotted upstate but never this far into the woods. We'll have patrols keep an eye out." I felt a small measure of relief, but not enough to calm my racing heart. After the deputy left, Daniel sat next to me on the couch. "We're leaving tonight," he said. "I don't want you here another day." I nodded, though I couldn't shake the feeling that it wouldn't be that simple. That evening, as we packed my things into the car, I noticed something odd. On the wooden porch rail was a fresh carving, deep grooves in the shape of a single word: payback. I showed it to Daniel, and his jaw tightened. "He's been here," he muttered. "He's watching." We finished packing quickly and loaded everything into the trunk. The air grew heavier as the sun dipped below the tree line, leaving streaks of crimson in the sky. Just as Daniel was about to start the car, my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. A man's low voice spoke. You can run, but you can't hide forever. The call ended with a click. I looked at Daniel, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. He didn't say a word. Instead, he started the engine and pressed hard on the gas, driving us down the narrow road that wound through the darkening woods. The headlights barely cut through the shadows as we sped toward the main road. Every turn felt like it could reveal another car blocking our path. As the cabin disappeared behind us, I felt a mix of relief and dread. We were leaving the woods, but I knew the danger was far from over. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival, and the fight was only beginning. We drove in silence for nearly 20 minutes, the only sound the hum of the tires on the cracked asphalt. The woods grew denser as the road twisted and turned like a serpent leading us out of its lair. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights closing in behind us. But there was nothing, just darkness and the faint outline of trees that blurred past like silent witnesses. Daniel's hands were tight on the steering wheel, knuckles pale under the strain. I could hear the ragged edge in his breathing. Where are we going? I asked softly, breaking the quiet. There's an old service road about 10 miles ahead, he said. It'll get us to the highway faster. Fewer people use it. Something about his tone made me uneasy. Do you think they're following us? I know they are, he replied grimly. We just can't see them yet. His words sent a chill down my spine. I glanced at my phone. No signal. We were cut off, alone with the night pressing in on us. The sky had turned the color of ink, heavy clouds blotting out the moon. Every few miles, the headlights caught the reflective eyes of deer lurking near the roadside. Their stillness felt almost ominous, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Half an hour later, Daniel slowed the car to a crawl. We're almost at the service road, he said. Keep an eye out for a sign. I leaned forward, scanning the roadside through the dim beams of the headlights. Finally, I spotted a crooked wooden sign, half buried under vines. The painted letters were nearly faded. East Hollow Road to 2 miles. That's it, I pointed. Daniel turned the wheel sharply, and we veered onto the narrow dirt road. The car jolted as the tires hit the uneven path. The sound of gravel crunching beneath us echoed strangely in the quiet. It felt as though the forest closed in tighter around us the deeper we went. Branches arched overhead like dark fingers clawing at the sky. After a few minutes, Daniel reached over and switched off the car's headlights. I froze. Why are you doing that? I whispered. They'll see the lights if they're behind us, he said. We'll use the moonlight. But there was barely any moonlight to see by. The road ahead was a ribbon of darkness. Daniel drove slowly, his eyes focused, muscles tense. That's when we heard the faint roar of another engine in the distance. My stomach dropped. They're here, I breathed. Daniel didn't answer. He pressed the accelerator slightly, just enough to pick up speed without making too much noise. The sound grew louder, tires skidding over gravel, as headlights flared suddenly behind us. My heart lurched into my throat. They found us, I cried. Daniel's face hardened. Hold on. The SUV from before appeared in the mirror, barreling down the road, its high beams cutting through the trees like twin blades of white fire. Daniel swerved left and right to keep ahead, the car bouncing over potholes and roots. My seatbelt dug into my shoulder as I clutched the handle above the door. They're getting closer, I yelled over the roar of the engines. Not for long, Daniel muttered, eyes fixed on the road. We rounded a sharp bend, and for a moment, the SUV disappeared from view. Daniel took the chance to turn abruptly onto an even narrower trail that branched off the main path. The sudden turn threw me against the door. Daniel, I gasped. Where does this road even go? Old logging route, he replied. It's rough, but they won't know it's here. The SUV's headlights appeared again a moment later, slowing as it searched for us. We cut the engine and sat still in the dark, hidden behind a thicket of tall pines. The night was eerily silent except for the distant hum of the other car idling. I held my breath, afraid even a gasp might give us away. Minutes passed like hours until the SUV finally roared past, continuing down the main service road. Daniel waited another minute before starting the car again and steering us out of hiding. Where are we going now? I asked, my voice trembling. There's an abandoned ranger station a few miles ahead, he said. We can stop there for a bit, regroup. The drive to the station was rough. Branches scraped against the sides of the car like fingernails on glass. When we finally arrived, the building loomed in the dark like a ghost from another time, its windows shattered, roof sagging, but still standing. Daniel parked behind the building, shielding the car from view. We'll rest here for a few hours, he said. We can't risk the main roads until morning. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and decay. The faint moonlight through the cracked windows gave the place an eerie glow. We found an old bench to sit on. I wrapped my shawl tighter around me, trying to ward off the chill that seeped from the walls. Daniel, I said after a long silence, why did Warren hate you so much? Daniel stared at the floor. Because I exposed him. He was running a scheme that cost dozens of families their savings. I turned in the evidence. I thought I was doing the right thing. You were, I said softly, but now we're paying the price. He nodded, his jaw tight. I'll fix this. I promise. I wanted to believe him, but the image of the carved word on our porch pabak kept flashing in my mind. Just as I began to drift into an uneasy doze, I was startled awake by the faint buzz of my phone. Somehow, despite the poor signal, a text message had come through. It was from the same unknown number. You should have stayed at the cabin. The woods are never truly empty. My heart pounded as I showed it to Daniel. He read it, then looked toward the door, his expression unreadable. Get some rest, he said quietly. I'll keep watch. But as I closed my eyes, I couldn't help but feel that the shadows around us were alive and that we weren't as alone as we wanted to believe. The night stretched on forever inside that crumbling ranger station. Every creak of wood, every gust of wind against the broken windows made me flinch. I sat curled up on the bench, pretending to rest, but my eyes refused to close. Daniel stood near the door with the shotgun, his posture tense. The dim glow of his phone lit his face as he checked for signal, but it flickered in and out, useless. At some point, exhaustion must have claimed me, because when I opened my eyes again, the faint light of dawn spilled through the cracks in the roof. Daniel was still standing guard, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like he hadn't blinked all night. We should move, he said hoarsely. Daylight will make it harder for them to hide. We returned to the car, and for a while, the woods seemed strangely peaceful, bathed in golden morning light. But I knew better. Danger often hid behind beauty. We had just merged back onto the service road when the sound of an engine thundered behind us. I turned, my breath catching in my throat. The SUV was back. Daniel cursed under his breath and pressed the accelerator. The dirt road trembled beneath us as both cars raced, dust rising in choking clouds. They won't stop, I whispered. No, Daniel said. They won't. His voice was flat, resigned. As the SUV closed the distance, I could make out the driver's face hard, weathered, with cold eyes that locked onto us like a predator. Warren, Mom, Daniel said suddenly, listen to me. If anything happens to me, you keep driving. Don't stop until you reach town. My chest tightened. Don't say that. The SUV rammed into us from behind, jolting the car violently. My head snapped forward, and I tasted blood from a cut on my lip. Daniel fought the wheel, keeping us steady. The road narrowed ahead, bordered by a ravine on one side. One wrong move, and we'd be swallowed by the trees below. Hold on, Daniel shouted. He slammed the brakes. The SUV shot past us, skidding as its tires fought for grip. Daniel swerved, ramming the side of their vehicle with all the force he could muster. The SUV teetered dangerously close to the ravine's edge. For a moment, it looked like it might fall, but Warren regained control, pulling back onto the road. He leaned out the window, shouting something I couldn't hear over the roar of engines. Then, suddenly, my phone buzzed in my lap. Another text. This ends where it started. My blood ran cold. The cabin. He wants us back there, I said aloud. Daniel glanced at me, his jaws set. Then that's where we finished this. We turned off the road, taking the path that wound back toward the old house in the woods. The SUV followed close, like a wolf herding prey. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might drown out the sound of the chase. When the cabin finally came into view, a wave of dread washed over me. The place that had felt like a prison now looked like a trap, waiting to close around us. Daniel skidded to a stop in front of the porch. Go inside, he ordered. No, I'm not leaving you, I cried. He grabbed my hand, squeezing it tightly. Mom, please. Before I could argue, the SUV screeched to a halt beside us. Warren stepped out, his presence commanding the clearing like a shadow come to life. Well, he drawled, his voice as cold as the night air. Daniel Harper. And the mother who raised a traitor. Daniel leveled the shotgun. Stay away from her. Warren laughed, low and cruel. Do you really think you can stop me? You ruined everything. My business, my reputation. You should have known I'd take everything from you in return. He took a step closer. Daniel's hands shook, but he held his ground. And then, in that moment, something shifted inside me. All the fear, the nights of loneliness, the calls, the threats, it all boiled into a single, sharp clarity. I stepped forward, standing between them, my voice, though trembling, carried in the still morning air. You think you're powerful because you can destroy lives, I said to Warren, but you've underestimated what a mother will do to protect her child. He smirked. And what's that, old woman? Begged me to spare him. No, I said firmly. End this. Before Warren could react, Daniel pulled the trigger. The shotgun roared, echoing through the trees. Warren stumbled back, clutching his arm as blood bloomed through his shirt. He dropped to his knees, fury blazing in his eyes. You'll regret this, he spat, but his strength faltered, and he collapsed onto the dirt. The woods fell silent, save for my ragged breaths and Daniel's shaking sobs. He dropped the shotgun, his body trembling, as he pulled me into an embrace. It's over, he whispered. It's finally over. I held him tightly, tears streaming down my face. But in the back of my mind, I knew the scars of this ordeal would never fully fade. The cabin, the phone calls, the chase, they had marked us forever. Later, the police would come. They would take Warren away, alive but broken, and they would ask us questions we couldn't fully answer. But one truth remained, unshakable. My son may have abandoned me once in that lonely house, but in the end, he fought to save me. And I, a mother left to the mercy of shadows, discovered that even in the darkest woods, love could be the strongest weapon of all.